The screen went gray in an instant. 1 second I was deep in the architecture console, tracing a routing path I'd written myself back in 2012. And the next, the cursor just blinked once like nothing had happened. "You've been moved to non-essential." That's all Mark said. My manager of 8 years. Without looking up from his tablet. He tapped his badge against the reader and walked out, leaving the conference room door clicking shut behind him like the period at the end of a sentence I never saw coming. I sat there staring at the grayed-out interface. No pounding heart. No immediate tears. Just this hollow ringing in my ears. The kind you get when the world tilts but you haven't fallen yet. 15 years at Nexus Forge in Austin. 15 years building the backbone of what was now a multi-million-dollar cloud infrastructure platform. I joined when we were 20 people crammed into a converted warehouse off South Congress, duct taping servers together on folding tables. I wrote the first failover protocols after our very first DDoS scare in 2013. I designed the layered authentication stack that kept us compliant during the big 2018 regulatory audits. I trained half the current team on those systems myself. But none of that mattered in that moment. The system logged me out cleanly. Session terminated. Access level. Non-essential. I forced a tight smile when a couple of junior devs glanced my way as I packed my laptop. They looked away fast. Like I'd become contagious. I walked to my desk, the desk I'd had until that morning, grabbed my mug that read Code Whisperer, and left without slamming anything. Inside, though, the cataloging had already begun. Every dependency that still pointed back to my old modules. Every undocumented trigger I'd left in place because the team was too busy shipping features to bother with full documentation. That evening in my small bungalow in Hyde Park, I poured a glass of Texas Red and sat on the back porch listening to the cicadas. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, like the moment before a storm when the air gets thick. Ryan Brooks, the new lead they'd brought in 6 months ago from a flashy Bay Area startup, had been pushing hard for streamlining. He called my carefully layered redundancies legacy bloat. I'd spent 3 weeks mentoring him on the core routing logic, walking him through the encryption handlers I'd hand-coded during all-nighters after client outages. He took notes in bright colors and nodded a lot. But I could see the impatience in his eyes, like he was already mentally replacing everything with whatever trendy framework was hot that quarter. The next 2 days, I kept my composure at the office. I was assigned to knowledge transfer tasks, which mostly meant sitting in on meetings where Ryan presented my old designs as his refreshed vision. He stood at the whiteboard in conference room B, sleeves rolled up, drawing clean boxes and arrows. "We're phasing out the secondary auth stack," he announced confidently. "It's dead weight slowing us down. Modern systems don't need that paranoia." A few people clapped lightly. Mila, from UI, who once asked me if back-end code literally touched wires, nodded along enthusiastically. I stood just outside the cracked door, unseen, watching. That secondary stack had saved us during last year's major incident when a sophisticated attack tried to spoof credentials. I noticed the pattern of failed logins early and rerouted traffic through an internal loop I'd built after a weekend of pure caffeine and focus. They never documented it properly. Just drank their free cold brew and watched me fix it in real time. Now Ryan was erasing it with a flourish of the dry erase marker. The cryptographic token handler I'd written in 2017 after we nearly lost a major client to a breach, labeled needs cleanup in the repo. They stripped comments like they were clutter, never pausing to ask why those sequences prevented race conditions in production. It would have been almost comical if I didn't feel the slow burn building in my chest. They tagged my old commits with deprecated, without understanding the logic beneath. Ego doesn't leave room for questions. Ryan walked out later bragging on a call about cutting the fat, sandwich in hand he hadn't paid for from the kitchen. The system was finally light and lean, he said. like tearing support beams out of a bridge because they clashed with the new aesthetic. I didn't warn them. What good would it do? I'd be the bitter ex-employee clinging to relevance. Instead, I started quietly preserving. Not sabotage, just insurance. Clean exports of logs. Access histories. Flagged anomalies. I saved them to an encrypted private drive using the same layered encryption they'd called over-engineered. The core dependencies still pinged my old login in places they hadn't scrubbed. The middleware still referenced my escalation triggers. They painted over the surface, but left the wiring intact. The investor showcase email hit inboxes like a rocket emoji explosion. Q3 vision and velocity from the CEO's assistant. Live demo hyped as the quarter's biggest moment. I wasn't invited officially, but Brenda from finance cornered me near the vending machines. You'll be doing the walkthrough again, right? You always explain the dashboard better than Ryan. When I told her I wasn't involved, her face fell. But you built half of that thing. 12 years stitching it from scraps when our backend was 3 overloaded servers and hope. I nodded, swallowing the cocktail of pride, nausea, and something sharper. Ryan passed by grinning. It's gonna be huge. Got reps from Horizon Ventures flying in. He laughed when I mentioned backups. We've streamlined all that paranoid redundancy. No more slowing us down. Paranoid. That's what they called the automated error rollbacks and custom triggers I'd bled hours into. Probably replaced with copy-paste from some blog post. The office turned into pre-demo frenzy. Snacks. Balloons. Branded lanyards. Meeting rooms labeled with buzzwords. Velocity. Disruption. Agility. The air smelled like overpriced body spray and desperation. I caught glimpses of the new dashboard, slick flat UI, bright buttons. No idea what was running underneath. The preview deck on Ryan's laptop, revolutionizing legacy systems through lean synergy. That legacy? Every line I'd written at 2 a.m. After crashes. Every hotfix saving client updates. I stayed late that Friday when the office emptied. Badge still worked for the secondary lab, small oversight in their streamlined access. I slipped in through an old shell script I'd written years ago when the network had more holes than Swiss cheese. The system monitor greeted me like an old friend. Heartbeat trackers still pinging my fallback logic. API comments carrying my name in the history. Nobody bothered scrubbing deeply. They were too busy calling themselves visionaries. I copied quietly. Config logs. Dependencies. Script histories. Zipped into an encrypted dead drop using the very handler Ryan had mocked. The archive locked itself with the same logic. I sat back under the fluorescent lights, staring at the same water stain on the ceiling no one fixed in a decade. A decade of fixing other people's emergencies. This was how it ended, not with fireworks, but with bone-deep stillness. Like watching thunderheads gather. You don't run. You wait. I emailed myself one final unassuming log, a timestamp showing the system still reaching for my script. A ghost touching a locked door. They thought they'd written me out. But ghosts don't need key cards. The morning of the demo, the break room looked like a wedding reception nobody wanted. White linens, untouched fruit trays, tech-branded cupcakes with peeling logos. Leadership strutted in Patagonia vests. The Horizon Capital rep, Martinez, arrived early with entourage. Ryan greeted him like royalty at the elevator. I took a seat in the third row. Anonymous folding chair beside interns whispering about the revolutionary redesign. Lights dimmed. Cinematic intro music swelled. Ryan took the stage. Clicker in hand, ego fully inflated. This is more than an update. This is declaring legacy thinking dead. We've reimagined every layer for next-gen performance. My jaw tightened. Every layer? He could barely rewire a thermostat without searching online. Martinez nodded at the buzzwords. elastic scalability, modular chains.
Predictive autonomy.
Ryan demoed the dashboard, clean animations, responsive toggles, pretty charts. Looked perfect on the surface. From the side, I saw Sam the engineer nervously chewing his nail. He knew enough to be worried. The tension coiled. I felt it in my spine. I knew exactly which click would call the script, pointing straight back to my archived fallback. The room held its breath. Interns starstruck. Bored smiling. Ryan raised the clicker like a magician.
Now.
Let's see real-time efficiency, Ryan said, voice smooth with rehearsal.
Click.
The main screen bloomed beautifully at first. Crisp UI. Soft animations. Logo settling like it owned the room. Simulated revenue models. Retention arcs. Uptime reports. All polished enough to make the janitor feel invested. Polite applause. Martinez nodded deeper, the kind signaling checkbook interest. Ryan smiled like he'd been knighted. Generating the live report now.
Click. Pause.
Blue spinner.
Once. Twice. Hung.
Then red text exploded. Fatal error. Core script missing. Configuration failure. Invalid endpoint. /archive /Lena_fallback not found. The room's pulse flatlined. Jeremy, wait. Ryan fumbled the clicker. Board members leaned forward. Sam dropped his pen with a clatter you could hear over the HVAC. The error stayed huge on the projector. Screaming in red. Whispers rippled. What's fallback? Thought this was live. Ryan muttered one moment, clicking again. Same error. Screen glitched like a dying bulb. CTO sprang up. Vein throbbing. Beelining to the engineers. Override it. Bypass the handler. Hard reset. Sam looked green. We can't. It's pointing to a fallback script that doesn't exist anymore. Or it does. But he trailed off. Panic bloomed. Dennis typed furiously. Sweat beading. Trying hard patch. Screen hiccuped. New error. Unauthorized call stack. Permissions invalid. System integrity compromised. Legal VP was already on the phone in obituary tones. Martinez went ice cold. Arms folded. The essential team hunched over a laptop like villagers with a broken idol. Throwing code desperately. Every frantic fix exposed more lies. They hadn't just deleted the fallback, they gutted its safety nets too. Backstage projector accidentally beamed raw logs to the front row, scrolling terminal lines. Red alerts like wounds. CTO read faster. Lips moving. Then froze. Error. Missing handler /Lena_fallback /init_sequence JSON. Last known reference. Lena'd, H owner. Access revoked. He whispered Lena like a curse. Turned to Ryan. Bone white. You said it was deprecated. Ryan stammered. We cleaned it. You said streamline. You deleted the root dependency. The one failsafe. Eyes shifted like a tide. Interns turned. A board member looked straight at me. I pulled out my phone slowly. Screen glowing with the same error log.
Gasps.
Martinez inhaled sharply, the sound of illusion shattering. Ryan stared like seeing a ghost. The name tied to the system's last lifeline. The name they revoked. The name pulsing red across every failure. You needed her. The entire room understood in that heavy silence. Who built it? Who kept it alive? Who they discarded? CTO staggered back. Mic slipped. Clattering loudly. Martinez stood deliberately. This meeting is over. Assistant already dialing. Whispering terminate and due diligence. Investors erupted. What the hell? Real production error? Fraud. Who approved deleting core failsafes? Why is the only person who could fix this sitting in the audience? CEO looked like he'd swallowed glass, realizing he'd burned his own safety net. I stood quietly amid the chaos. No dramatics. Picked up my bag and walked down the aisle as errors kept bleeding across the screen like a severed artery. Heads turned, but no one stopped me. What could they say? Passing Brenda. She whispered wide-eyed. Did you know this would happen? I paused. I knew the system. They didn't. Out the corridor. Past untouched cupcakes and the Q3 Vision and Velocity banner. Through glass doors into the Texas afternoon sun. The world outside turned oblivious. Cars on the highway. People on phones. Life continuing while their implosion echoed behind. No applause needed. No revenge taken. The system spoke for itself. Turns out I wasn't essential. Until everything depended on what I'd built. But as I drove home through the hill country roads, windows down, warm wind carrying cedar and distant rain, the satisfaction felt layered with something heavier. Dark.
Quiet.
Not joy exactly, but the weight of being proven right at such cost. The questions lingered like the cicadas at dusk. How many times do we discard the hands that held the foundation? How often does ego rewrite history until reality crashes the rewrite session? In the race for velocity, what gets lost when we call experience bloat? I thought of the junior devs avoiding my eyes that first day. The way Ryan's confidence grew like mold, fast but shallow. The interns starstruck by buzzwords they couldn't debug. And the executives, nodding at slides while the wiring frayed underneath. Legal ramifications would follow, audits, potential lawsuits from investors, compliance hits. But those were surface. Deeper was the human cost. Trust eroded, talent undervalued, a company forced to confront its own shortcuts. That night, my phone stayed silent at first. Then messages trickled, Sam apologizing quietly, Brenda asking if I'd consult, even the CTO's indirect outreach through HR about reinstating key resources. I didn't reply immediately. The ghost had done its work. In the end, the crash wasn't my doing. I just stopped holding the net they assumed would always be there. Gravity did the rest. Beautiful. Inevitable. And in its own way.
Fair.
The moral hums long after the lights come up. In tech, as in life, foundations matter more than facades. The quiet architects who code at 2 a.m. aren't non-essential until the moment they are. And when the demo fails spectacularly, the real innovation sometimes lies in what was never erased completely. Weeks later, the story made quiet rounds in Austin tech circles. Nexus Forge scrambled with emergency hires, rollback plans, and damage control PR. Ryan was quietly reassigned. Investors paused funding rounds. The board mandated full architecture audits, ironically pulling my old documentation from backups to reconstruct what was lost. I consulted part-time for a competitor across town, where experience was prized rather than streamlined away. The bungalow porch became my thinking spot again. Glass of wine in hand, watching sunsets paint the live oaks gold. Sometimes I wonder if they ever truly learned. Or if the next hotshot lead will repeat the cycle. Labeling wisdom legacy until another crash forces remembrance. The tension between innovation and preservation is eternal in our industry, fast movers versus those who remember why the walls stand. The emotional residue lingers, betrayal's sting softened by vindication's calm. Pride in the work that outlasted the dismissal. A subtle warning to anyone listening. Value the builders before the structure sways. In that third row seat, watching the red airs bloom, I felt not triumph, but a profound, haunting clarity. Systems fail when we forget their origins. People break when we erase their names from the code they breathed life into. And so the story circles back to that gray screen. The blinking cursor. The quiet click of a badge. What feels like an ending is often just the moment the real narrative begins, when the overlooked become undeniable. The sun sets over Austin. And somewhere in a server farm, a heartbeat tracker still pings faintly, remembering.